Assumptions and boilerplate. If your underlying assumptions are wrong, the attorney's going to go after your assumptions like it's a building block. Your appraisal's a brick wall, and they're going to start taking out those bricks at the bottom to make the whole thing crumble. They're going to ask you if your assumption changed, would it change your conclusion? Those are tough questions to answer on the stand. Read your boilerplate. I had a case on Monday. The appraiser had this whole thing about the economy. It was small commercial property. It hadn't really changed from October 08 to October 09 in his market and whatever for small retail. And then in his boilerplate, he had all this support for his capitalization rate. And there was this devastating language about the whole change of the economy and vacancies were going up, rent concessions, rents were going down. And I just had him read it right out of his own report. He didn't even seem to know it was there. It's real easy. I've seen lots of people doing properties that are environmentally impacted. And then they have a disclaimer that says, I've given no consideration for the environmental impact. Well, read your boilerplate. If that's what your case is about, you shouldn't say, I'm not considering it. Support for adjustments, paired sales, market studies. Not so much now, but it used to be people would say, after years of experience and discussions with those knowledgeable in the market, I'm making an adjustment of such and such. And I suspect that Judge Androsini is not going to find that to be real persuasive. No. Something from, I think it was Pete Elwood, a famous appraiser back in the day, and this is just a great quote. He said he believes that the bright 17-year-old high school student in elementary astronomy can do a better job estimating the distance to the moon than the old man of the mountains who has looked at the moon for 80 years and has all that experience looking at the moon, but he has no facts or nothing to base it on. So, sometimes we kind of know. I can kind of tell you right now in certain markets what apartments might be going for per unit or industrial buildings per square foot. You got to have the facts. Demonstrative evidence. And I'm almost done. We're going to skip towards this. But I did a trial once. The whole trial had to do about sale number 3. This is what the whole case was about. And we get through the testimony and we're describing the neighborhood and the zoning and the site description and the building, and then we got to sale number 1, and then we got to sale number 2, and then we got to sale number 3, and it was so incredibly boring, and the judge wasn't really paying attention, and it was not an important case. We had nothing at that moment like arrows. Hey, this is what the case is about. We needed at that point to either have some photographs, have a deed marked, something that shows, get everyone's attention, something all of a sudden during our presentation is different. Why is it different? Why are we having a deed now for sale number 3? But all of a sudden everyone's paying attention. So it's not always, the attorney you're working with might not know that you have extra good pictures or some other information that can make a better showing. There are lots of cases, and this happens a lot in residential tax appeals, where the appraiser for the taxpayer says, the property's in poor condition. It's probably every case you ever hear that the taxpayer says the property's in poor condition. And after a while, I'm sure the trier of fact is just going, I've heard that a million times before. It's important to have demonstrative evidence. Demonstrative evidence is, a picture's worth 1,000 words. That is a property in poor condition. And if you had a picture, and if you're really showing it, more important than just saying a property is in poor condition. So demonstrative evidence, it's actually one of the parts, once you get over the nerves, that can make having a trial a little bit more fun, and your proof's better. Theme of a case. Sometimes, and I kind of alluded to this earlier, sometimes the case is really about one thing. There's lots of things that you might be making adjustments about, but the thing you're disagreeing might have to do with wetlands and whether you have access to other land. It could be whether or not, what is the economic rent on a property, or a lot of things. If there's one main theme, when you're doing your presentation, you don't have to go through every single thing in your appraisal. It's going to get admitted to evidence. You don't want what the case is really about to just get lost in the sauce, because otherwise, and it's sort of that example about sale number 3 where I had this thing, it was really about this one comparable. If they really believed the one comparable was, good, we were going to win. If they didn't believe this one comparable was good, the other stuff really wasn't so good. It was supportive, but it wasn't going to carry the weight. So think about certain cases. It's not every little adjustment. sometimes there's one really key component, which is what the case is about. It will make your presentation better. I see lease summaries all the time. I go through the sales comparison approach. There's a sale, there's a picture, there's a sale, there's a picture. I get to the income approach, there's 4 leases. There's 2 things wrong with these leases. One is there's no pictures. I don't know why appraisers show pictures with sales comps and they don't show them with the leases. It makes me think you weren't there. We all have cameras. We can now all do it with our phones. We're going to make adjustments for physical condition, all these things. Again, a picture's worth 1,000 words. It would make me, when I see a report like this, I'm going to go out and take a look at it. I'm going to have pictures. I've seen trials where the appraiser can't even identify the leases from the pictures. Well, if you can't do that, all the information might be perfect. You just blown it because they make they're not going to believe it. The other things is, in this lease, like the first lease from Esiason to Namath, it says it's net. Well, I know there's net leases where the tenant pays everything and gross leases where the landlord pays everything. Brokers have their own terms. But unless you know what net, how that's any different than net, if you can't explain those expenses, what it really means, you've blown that one. Parcels to Mara, lease number 2. Modified gross. Well, there's about 500 different ways a lease can go from net to gross with everything in between. Is it taxes? Is it taxes above the base year? If you don't know, you're already in trouble. It's just a place where I'm going to ask questions. The third one, Crane Pool to Harrelson. This one's triple net, which as far as I know means net, but we really mean it. You got to really know what's in the document. The last one, Lasser to Crabtree, office, it's just net. That's the one that's probably right. So again, don't make it easy by, if you have something and it stands out, someone's going to ask you a question. Economic rent, I'm going to go through that. That's really a New Jersey thing. Again, you got to make adjustments to your leases, terms adjustments. Were there concessions? What's your source? Just like with a sale, who'd you verify it with? Vacancy rate. In New Jersey, we use stabilized vacancy rate. Sort of the basic idea is you have an empty warehouse and a leased warehouse, but they're identical buildings side by side. They should have the same assessment in New Jersey. In New York, they do leased fee, sort of more real world. What your vacancy rate is, like everything else, you need support. There are lots of market studies you can use. If you're going to use the vacancy history of the subject, if you only use a year or 2, the judge is probably going to give it no weight because maybe it's been rented for 30 straight years and the tenant just moved out and so it's vacant until the next tenant comes in. Perhaps if you gave a 10-year study of the subject property, well, that's now becoming its own sort of study, just like any of the studies you buy, you can get on the market. Again, vacancy rates, you got it. Like everything else, you need to support it, or at least support it enough. Often, when I got to the theme of the case, that's not what the case is about. You're saying 10%, they're saying 7.5%, you're so close. If those were the only differences, the case would settle. So this case is really about something else, but you still need support. Capitalization rate, same thing, you need support. They used to require in New Jersey that you actually tried to do it the way it's taught in the book, have sales, have the income and expenses, and they realized that's basically impossible. And when you did it, then it was like, well, one sale isn't the market, so there's all sorts of studies. It's important if you're using those studies and you're using the band of investment that it's based on something. If you're saying it's based on an interest rate, where'd you get that interest rate? If it's based on ACLI, Corpac, some of the capitalization studies, understand how they're used. There's boilerplate in those surveys you might get asked questions on. But you can't just say it's the usual cap rate, because there is no such thing as the usual cap rate. You got to have some kind of support. Expenses and income producing property, sometimes what the case is about is the expenses. Everyone has the rents for the apartment right because there's a rent roll. There's an operating history, but the expenses are very different. The court is liable to look at these very carefully to make sure someone didn't put on a new roof and is taking out the whole deduction in 1 year. It will make the value look artificially low. Maybe that should be spread over time. It's always good to get from your client at least a 3-year income and expense statement so you can see if there's any aberrations. If there's any aberrations, ask the property owner why. Repairs and maintenance is a big one of those areas where things can be really changed dramatically. Cost approach. Generally, I don't think you should use it unless you have that unique property, that's special purpose property, something where there's no sales, there's no income. If you use it correctly. I see a lot of residential reports where two things happen. There's a land value, there are no land sales, there's no allocation, there's just a site value out of the blue. You know, your sales comparison approach might be perfect. We're going to spend an hour and a half on the proper way to figure out land value. You know, isn't it, Mr. Witness, can't you use comparable sales? Yes. Did you use comparable sales? No. Can you do land residual? Yes. Did you do land residual? No. You know, you're going to be wanting to be off the witness stand so quickly. The other thing is I see cost approaches based on Marshall and Swift, and every number is 0.00. I've used Marshall and Swift for 30 years. I've never gotten any number to end up in perfect zeros. It makes me think you didn't do it, so the first thing I'm going to do is get Marshall and Swift and see that I can't recreate it, and the next thing you know is you're going to be asked to recreate the cost approach, which didn't even matter because the whole case is about the sale next door, and it's just not going to be fun. And then who knows how to do depreciation? You know, good luck right there. What else do you need to know? And we're just about done here. You're going to need to know a little appraisal theory. You might be asked on the witness stand appraisal theory to back up what you're doing. We've all taken the courses, but sometimes before you testify, it might be good, depending what the case is about, to read those little sections again. You might need to know a little USPAP. Again, it might not be important. You might be asked about it, which means they don't have something substantive, but you better still be able to answer the question. A little bit of tax appeal law in your jurisdiction, whatever jurisdiction you're in, is important, a little bit. Like in New Jersey, you need to know the valuation date's October 1st. You don't need to know a lot of tax appeal law in any jurisdiction, but if you just do a regular appraisal and you're doing it for 2012 and you value it the day you see your house, and you're already in big trouble. Other things to remember: if you have a weak spot, it's going to be attacked. So look at your appraisal. Sometimes it's hard. You did it a year and a half ago. You're going to have a trial in 2 weeks. Look at it. I know I look at it all the time, and I look at one of my adjustments and I go, why did I do that? Don't just look at your appraisal the day of the trial, because sometimes you had a good reason. It was so obvious you didn't really explain it, and a year and a half later it's not that obvious. You better figure it out before the trial, because someone's going to ask you.